Okay, I give you all the way from the Netherlands, Jos van Oever, with WebODF. It's all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kai. Okay, it's a bit delayed this talk. It's because the trains were delayed. In fact, I was sitting in the train which broke down just at the next train station. Yeah, it was supposed to arrive just in time. I actually came half an hour earlier. I got a delay, so this train I had to be on time, and then it just broke down. It just stopped.
I told you all the way from the Netherlands.
Yeah, yeah. Being in the Netherlands doesn't mean you're close. At least not if you take public transport. But let's get to the talk. I already heard some people discussing the merits of JavaScript. So for them, proponents, people who like JavaScript, people who don't like it, this will be an interesting talk, I think. It's going to be about WebODF, and WebODF is a JavaScript-based Office suite, at least a viewer, and we are adding more and more editing functionality. I would like to start off because it's Software Freedom Day, and we had an interesting news event yesterday in the Netherlands, a pretty sad one, but it's all today with Software Freedom. Yesterday we heard that the Dutch Parliament, one part of Dutch Parliament, will be using, all of them will be using these guys.
Was it yesterday?
Yeah.
I heard it long before.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought Wilma wasn't. Yeah.
She wasn't up to date.
Yeah, but
No.
I heard it 2 months ago or something.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
We're probably familiar with this, right? Does this say Software Freedom to you?
No.
No.
Why don't you let it loose?
Yeah, well, actually, it's not mine. I was given this to do some software development because, yeah, WebODF is free software. There are many people who are locked, who are enslaved by these devices, and we don't want to be too brutal to them, so we do try to give them WebODF, and that's why I have one of these. But yeah. So I'm not lying. This is actually the news article which said it. They will actually. This is part of their job. They will get one of these, and it's problematic. And why is it problematic? Because this iPad embodies all the threats to digital freedom. It relies on closed cloud applications because you install applications, you have to connect to some web server to be able to get them or to do backups. It's full of digital rights management. It's yours, but you cannot control it. It's locked down. And that's a big problem. If you want to write software for it, you have to buy another machine, an iMac. Then you have to pay $100 to get a license. Then Apple has to like you. You have to say, Apple, please, can I get a license? And they will call you up, they do a background check on you, and then maybe you will get a license to write software for your own device. And that's what DRM is about. It's great. Well, it's a threat to digital freedom. Software patents, another big threat. I won't go into that too much. Closed file formats is also a problem, and we used to all think that this was a very big problem, but considering all the other ones, it's actually not so bad anymore. But let's not whine, let's find solutions. So, what are solutions for digital freedom? Closed cloud applications. Well, the best solution is simply, as an open source community, to provide alternatives, to make something better and have people use that and educate them. Well, that's for all of them. Try to educate people about the dangers of the threats to their digital freedom. Digital rights management, yeah, also provide alternatives. Once you have a device which has it, there's no getting around of it. So just make sure that in the marketplace there are alternative devices. For software patents, the only thing we can do is use politics to fight them. And closed file formats, the best way to fight those is work on standards, open standards, where people can work together and make better file formats that are available for implementation by everybody. The last point is particularly interesting because this talk is about WebODF, and ODF is a file format. Let's go back a bit on standards, a bit of the evolution. Where are we with file formats right now? Email is a nice file format, I think, because it's very simple. It's not trivial, but it's very simple, and everybody's using it. From day one of the internet, people are using email, and it works on all machines. It's just great. It's a very simple standard, and everybody implements it the way it should be implemented. There were some attempts at adding proprietary extensions to it, but they failed. You simply have good protocols for it. Web pages. Web pages had a more bumpy ride. It was quite a long time before every web browser was displaying web pages in the same way. And we're still not there yet, but it's very much better because we now have competing open source browsers, which are getting better all the time. So for web pages, we're doing pretty well. But for Office documents, not so good yet, really. Not as good as HTML and email anyways. Closed formats prevail still. And we do have an open standard, open document format, but it's not as widely used as you would like. So we need to spread that. We need to have more ODF because ODF is a great standard. If you want to improve ODF, you can join the TC, you can help, you can have a voice. If you want to read how it's implemented, we have lots of documentation on it. There's many open source implementations of it. Okay, the cloud. Yeah, the cloud is also a pretty big problem, but I won't go into too much details right now because, well, I think most people here know what the problem with the cloud is. Your files are on somebody else's computer and they can go away at any point. So you want to be able to have your own cloud, or at least a cloud under your control. But it's good to think, why is the cloud growing? Why are more people using cloud? Well, it's easy. Take a service like Dropbox. What it's doing is totally trivial, right? It's hosting files. It's like an FTP server with a nice UI and a few nice applications. And people are flocking to it. They're just saying, oh, you can have my files, I'll put them on your server. The security sucks, but still people use it. Well, at least, well, it probably still sucks, but some more glaring problems have been solved now. But yeah. So people are using cloud because it's easy and because they're not technologically very capable. So as an open source community, we should provide software which is as easy as the commercial things that are available. And then people might consider alternatives. Well, the same, in this line also you should think of WebODF, because what's the goal of WebODF? Well, it's a JavaScript library, and the goal of it is to make it easy to add ODF to support to your website and to your application. And to make this easy, we use JavaScript because JavaScript is everywhere. It's in your browser, it's in your toolkit. Every machine has a JavaScript interpreter these days.
Is the goal also to be able to edit locally a locally running instance of WebODF? I mean, does it need to be connected to a server?
No. No.
Okay.
No, you can just write an application in your favorite toolkit, GTK, Qt, iOS, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because with many widget sets these days, they have an embedded browser. And you can say to the browser, okay, you can read files in this directory. And then you can use WebODF on your local files. Yes.
Okay.
You can use it in your own application to read from whatever storage you like, including your own hard disk. So a small overview of what's going to be in this talk, and I'm probably going to skip some parts because it's late in the day and. But yeah. So first I'm going to show you how to use it, and this is going to be very quick. Then I'm going to go a bit into the history, explain how it works. Then this part I'm probably going to skip on how to write JavaScript in a clean way, because we'll probably get flame wars all over the place. And then I'm going to explain how to embed it in your program, and that will address also your question. And then I'm going to go over some use cases and the roadmap. So how can you use WebODF? Well, first you need to get it. You can just get it from Pretorius, and inside is a small HTTP server written in JavaScript, and you can run it in Node.js, but any HTTP server will do, if you want to put it on a website, that is. So any plain HTTP server. WebODF doesn't run on your server, it runs on the client side. It's all JavaScript. So all you need is to check it out and put it in your web server. So what actually do you put on your web server? Well, there's a compiled version of WebODF, which comes as just one file, webodf.js. But in the repository you have like 20 different JavaScript files. For convenience, we compile them into one file. But it's an open source project, you can see all the individual JavaScript files as well. And then there's a WebODF CSS file, which contains some styling information. And these 3 lines are basically what you need in your web page, right? So you get an element somewhere in your web page.
This is the embed code.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have an element somewhere called ODF. I get it via a simple DOM call, and then I create a new canvas. The canvas, I load the document. That's it. Yeah, this document should be in the same directory as the HTML file because it's a relative path. So then your web page looks like this. See, here's the ODF element. And if you're writing an application, you basically also put something like this into a web frame. And yeah, that's it. I could do it. Oh yeah, and you should, of course, put some files on the same server. Yeah, that's it. Are there any questions about this part? I don't think it's very difficult, right?
I see ODT, ODS, ODT.
Yes. That's my files I'm going to publish.
Okay.
So an ODT file is a text file, ODP is a presentation, ODS is a spreadsheet. So I put them on my server, and you can just put your files there, the files you want to publish on the web, and you want people to be able to read your files. If they don't have, for example, if they don't have LibreOffice installed, you can just show this file on your web page, so people don't need software to read the ODF file.
It works only with these extensions.
Hmm?
It only works with the files with these extensions.
And the extensions don't matter.
Okay.
No, it doesn't look at the extensions. This is what you normally use for the extensions, but it only works with open document files. So it doesn't work with Microsoft. Well, it does work with Microsoft Office if you save as open document files.
Okay.
But it doesn't work with .doc files, for example.
Yeah.
If you want to work with that, then you need a server-side solution which converts it to ODF for you.
Yeah.
And there's software for that. But the basic idea here is to use an open standard. So, a bit of the history. I'm going to go through this quickly. Who doesn't know what WebKit is? Good. Yeah. Who knows what KHTML is? Oh, that's not too many people. Ah. Maybe you're just shy. KHTML is like the predecessor of WebKit. It's a web browser, part of the KDE project, and it's more than 10 years old.
You need Apple to put DRM into it, otherwise nobody will know it.
Yeah, yes, yeah. We need a big marketing machine. I mean, KHTML, it's really for the not so cool guys, right? You need Apple to make it cool, and then everybody starts using it.
Yeah.
But it's still the same cool software. So this was for a very long time a good browser, and Apple also wanted a browser, and they didn't want to write it from scratch. They didn't want to use Mozilla for some reason. They thought it was too big or something. So they forked it, and initially they made not so many releases. Just when they made a new Safari, which what the browser is called, they would just dump the code. But eventually they became a bit nicer, and they started a whole project. And other people got involved again. Nokia got involved. So the Trolltech people got involved. GNOME people got involved. Google got involved. So many different people.
You know who got involved first?
No.
Kurt Schouwen from Atheos.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was the second, so the first independent web browser based upon KHTML.
Yeah, the first was Conqueror.
Yeah, Conqueror used KHTML, and the
Yeah.
first port to another web browser was.
Was it before or after Apple?
Oh, it was many years before Apple.
Right.
It wasn't WebKit, it was still KHTML.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was the browser that is now WebStreams.
But I have to stop you there, because there's a big difference between Apple did something to WebKit, which is pretty cool, and I will talk to you about. And
Yeah, the
only
syllable was also the first to port WebKit, as far as I know.
No, not
No?
the first.
Oh, after Apple, not the first?
It was the first
I'm
KHTML.
going to cut this off, because KHTML is based on Qt, and Qt uses its own C++ library. Apple doesn't use that. So what they wanted to use all the cool code for laying out web pages, but they didn't want to use the same string libraries. So they made an abstraction layer, so you could choose if you wanted to use Qt or Apple string classes. And this was
Were
really
the
moved.
Apple string classes also C++ based?
I don't know.
Oh.
I think so. Yeah. Okay, so at least eventually it grew and grew, and now nearly any mobile device, has a browser based on this. So this is pretty cool. And since the company I work for, we write on an Office suite, and we thought, yeah, can't we do the same trick for an Office suite? So we also wanted to do the trick where you can just replace the string type and abstract it. And so we thought, okay, let's start a project we call ODF Kit. And we'll just fork WebKit, or we write a patch for it, which allows it to read ODF files. And we started working on it. And we started implementing tests, and all the tests in WebKit are written in JavaScript or web pages. So we wanted to verify that our reading of ODF files was fine. And so to test that, I wrote some functions in JavaScript, and I saw that, hey, actually we don't really need C++. We can do all of this stuff in JavaScript. So yeah, the ODF project actually showed us that we could have a cooler project called WebODF. So instead of forking WebKit or extending it and having a C++ functionality for ODF and being available in these browsers, we went to JavaScript, and suddenly we can run in all browsers. So that's the reason why WebODF is written in JavaScript. And many people are writing cool stuff in JavaScript these days. So here's just a list of some cool stuff out there. One of my favorites is PhoneGap, which allows you to write an application in JavaScript, and they will then package it for any mobile device. Okay, so how does it actually work? For that, I have to go a bit into the background of ODF. Well, an ODF file is basically a zip file, and inside there is XML and images, roughly speaking. So if you look at the XML, it reuses a lot of the XML formats available, for example SVG or XSLFO, RDF, things which are quite common, and it just combines them to have an Office file format. Yeah, it's an active open standard. There's still weekly meetings. We just released an almost approved ODF 1.2, and as you can see, there are many implementations. We have LibreOffice, we have Kalira, OpenOffice, KOffice, AV Word, Microsoft supports it, Google supports it. Yeah, so it's a widely implemented standard. And what you can realize is that HTML and ODF are actually not so different. There's one big difference, is that ODF is a zip file and HTML is just, yeah, it's a file which references files which you have to get over the network. So this one is nice. I have one file, I get it, I read it, and this one I read a page and I have 10 different servers which I access. So in some ways ODF is actually, for some reasons, nicer than HTML, but that's just a sidetrack. So how does it work? So you start with the HTML file, and then you load the binary file with XML HTTP request. You do a binary request, you get the zip file. The zip file is then converted as a string in JavaScript, and you can unzip it with some JavaScript code. Even though JavaScript doesn't really support binary objects, at least, yeah, no, it doesn't really. There's still some crazy person who thought, hey, let's have a deflate algorithm in JavaScript, and we are happily using that. So we can now unzip files in the web browser. So when we unzip that, we can then take the XML in there and just put it all in DOM tree. We have the HTML DOM tree, we take an element and we put all the XML in there, and well, what happens if you put unknown XML in an HTML tree? It will say, yeah, I don't know what to do with it, and it will just show you just text. All the text nodes, it will just render them. So to be able to make something nice of that, you have to add CSS. So you say, okay, this is a paragraph, you put a CSS onto it, it's a block. If it's italics, you say, okay, CSS italics. Now, ODF has its own format for doing styling. So we just read that, and we convert that to CSS. And then, of course, we have to load the images. The images we take from the zip file, we convert them to a base64 data URL, and then use them as a background in CSS to display them. Yeah, I think I explained all of this. So what you see then is this is the DOM tree, you have a body, and then the document there, that's actually your ODF document. This is not HTML, it's just some other XML namespace. It's actually the ODF namespace, and you see all the parts there, and it's just in your browser. So at this point, you have a very nice DOM object, which is basically the same as what you have on your file, and you can use JavaScript to manipulate this. So you have a very easy way of working with your documents, just like you have for web programming. So the converting of the ODF style to CSS, the two issues. So there's different style names in ODF, and the selectors are different. So I'll give you an example for that. Here's a part of the ODF, but basically you have a named style, for example, my bold, and it will say that the font is bold. And this style will then be used, some element will say, okay, this paragraph has this style. In HTML it's different. There on the top of your file you have some sort of these selectors, and they match certain elements, and on the elements that they match, there you apply the CSS. So what we do is we just take a selector where we also use this name, and then the bold gets applied in the right position. Okay, an advantage of all of this is that we don't do any conversion. When we read the file, we just put it in there. We don't read it into some document model. Yeah, we do. It's a document model, but it's basically just the XML. It's not something we hand coded. So it's very simple, and you don't lose information. So, what's my time?
Let's check.
Are there any questions so far?
More than 20 minutes left.
That's great. Okay, so I'm going to go through this roughly. Because all of this is written in JavaScript, and JavaScript is not a very elegant programming language. You can do a lot of things wrong there. So this book here, JavaScript, the good parts, is almost essential reading if you want to do any JavaScript programming, because it's very easy to make unmaintainable JavaScript. So just get this book and use a tool like JSLint to clean up your JavaScript when you start writing it. And other tips, everything which is written here has its own slides, so I'll just go through it. This book, Douglas Crockford, he invented JSON, and it's recommended reading. Another thing is we have an abstraction in there, a runtime. Basically, in WebODF you want to load files, you want to save files, you want to send debug information to your application, and this is different in a browser from a normal application. So we abstracted that. We have a load function in our runtime, and you can just change it. So if you don't like that function, or if you want to write to your hard disk, instead of a web server, you just overload that function.
Just a little side note to connect the talks. Have they told you already in the breaks that JSON is inspired by Rebel?
No, and it wouldn't mean much to me because I don't know what Rebel is.
Yeah, but well, yeah, you're using it every day in JSON.
Yeah.
It's if you read what Douglas Crockford says about that, he's very clear about that.
Okay, I'll have a look at the JSON Wikipedia page to read up on that. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's there, but Douglas Crockford is one of the people who is specifically telling it himself.
Oh, that's good of him. Yeah. You should tell people what the inspiration for stuff is. Well, one thing you can do in JavaScript is to use callbacks to speed stuff up. You don't want to, well, it's very easy in JavaScript, you have a lot of callbacks in there. I'm not going to go into details of this. Unit testing is something we do a lot. That's actually interesting because even though WebODF is usually you think of it, this is something in the browser, you can also run it on the command line. Just unzipping and rezipping a file is something we can use in unit tests on the command line, which is very nice because we just run make tests before you do a commit, and then it's just sort of quality assurance. And you run it in different JavaScript runtimes, so there's Node.js, Rhino. We also instrumented the code, so when we run our unit tests, we know how often every line of JavaScript was called. And yeah, JS coverage, very nice tool. Node.js is just a runtime for JavaScript on the command line, not too much details. The same goes for Rhino. The bottom one, Qt WebKit, is actually pretty cool. This is, it's basically a whole WebKit in one small C++ library which you can, well, it's not actually very small, but it's a very easy way to write your own web browser, which includes, for example, a command line client. WebODF comes with a small command line tool to convert ODF to PDF, simply because QWebKit can load a WebODF page and it can print to PDF. So voila, that's all we needed. And we can also make screenshots. Yeah. Closure compiler is the code that takes all the JavaScript files, compiles them into one fast JavaScript file. But that's not the most important thing to us. The most important part is that it actually does syntax checking. What I really don't like about JavaScript is that it doesn't have types, right? So everything is a var and it's duck typing. So when you have a problem, you see it at runtime. But this compiler actually does some sanity checking beforehand, which is very, very useful. Okay, so how can you use WebODF? I told you how it works on the web page. This is how it works in an Android application, which is available in the marketplace. It's actually very simple. It's just you say in your widget set, give me a web view. Then you open a small web page and you overload the loading functions. So what you see here is the runtime.read function. I hope it's. Do you have a stick? No, I don't have a stick. The runtime.read function is implemented into a call to an object called file reader, and that's actually a Java object which has access to the file system. So by overriding these two functions, read and get file size, we have now access to the local file system, and we can use WebODF in a local application. Are there more use cases? Yes. Well, the most obvious one I already told you about is to publish ODF documents on your web page, and already quite a number of sites doing that, which I think is very cool. Edit documents in your content management system. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. Yeah, collaborate with others. If you can edit documents in a central system easily, that's possible. You can write a browser plugin for ODF viewing. Suppose you have a lot of users that they have a certain browser, but they don't want to install OpenOffice, for example, or they don't have Microsoft Office, and they still want to be able to view ODF. Then you can write a plugin for the browser, which when it encounters an ODF file, it will use WebODF to render it in the browser. You can have a simplified editor because you have this DOM tree and you have very good control over it. You can programmatically say, okay, only these parts are editable. Only, for example, paragraphs with a certain style, or only the first 3 paragraphs. And when you stop editing, actually check if the user, what he has typed is not too long, like you do with normal form validation in a web page. You can change the UI. Actually, WebODF doesn't come with the UI itself, it just comes with a canvas. And if you want any buttons for bold, italic, next page, stuff like that, then you can add them yourself. We also have something in a demo, but yeah, you can use whatever you like. And we've actually used this in the committee who specifies ODF to look at proposals and then quickly test them in WebODF to see if they actually make sense. So mobile devices, yeah, I showed you the iPad. I'm currently working on putting it on the iPad. It's already on the Android. We're also working on Migo and BlackBerry.
It runs fine on Migo.
From a browser, yes, but I haven't made an application for it yet. Sure, yeah. So yes, if you go to a web page with WebODF, that works. But we also want to make a local viewer. So yeah. Yeah, Sarafa. Sarafa, Sarafa is a mail server, and it has a web UI. And in this web UI, if you oh no, wait, control. No. Yes. Yeah. So this is the Sarafa web interface behind this window. And this window is actually open because somebody received an email with an ODF attachment. He clicked on it and a window opened with the view of this document, and the download button is there to actually get the document and open it in the local Office suite. But with a simple plugin now, suddenly your web client has support for viewing ODF documents. And it can also show text documents or spreadsheets. Yeah. And the guys at Truffle like this very much, so they give me this piece of decorated piece of plastic.
Those local viewers from a few slides back, how are they implemented? On V8 or something?
Well, if you run in Android, then it comes with V8.
And, but are
You just use the normal browser, or whatever JavaScript interpreter you have in your browser. Is what you use.
it's still a browser window, but
Yeah,
it's without all the buttons.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. This is the use case for change tracking, which is a proposal in ODF, and what we do there is basically these are 3 WebODF windows, 3 different documents, and what we wanted to do is we wanted to test the change tracking specification, so color parts of the documents. This is version before, version after, and this version shows the changes. So it's basically a quick way of testing this. Content management, the guys at TikiWiki, it's a pretty nice wiki. They are working on, they actually have integrated WebODF there, and also they enable the editing functionality, which I thought was very brave, but it works quite nicely. So they can edit and save, and then you see the history just like you see on a normal wiki for normal wiki pages. And Alfresco also has, somebody wrote an add-on for Alfresco to use WebODF. So a bit on if you want to do more cool, more elaborate things, and how you could do that. It would be nice to use a sort of plugin system. Basically, in the middle there you see your application, your HTML page. You load the document in there, and then you can modify it in any way. You can do it programmatically. You can say, okay, I want to use Google Translate, or I want to highlight some numbers, or I want to pump in data from a database, whatever way. Then you can run validate. We have a RelaxNG validator written in JavaScript in there. It's a bit new, so maybe you want to disable it, but it usually works fine. It can actually validate the ODF specification itself, which is a 600-page document. And then you update the CSS so it looks nice, so that you actually in the user interface see the changes, and you can also save it to disk. So basically, if somebody adds more functionality, it will be either here, if you want to customize it, or if you want to send patches to make the rendering better, you can send stuff for this to make the CSS better. So what's our roadmap? Well, we want to add more features all the time. We don't support all of ODF. That's a lot. So that's still quite some work. And we want to have applications for all the mobile devices. So that's what we're working on really hard now. We just want to have it everywhere, and then more developers will come in. They say, "Oh yeah, there's this ODF viewer on the iPad. I want to write a patch for it." And then because we actually took the effort of putting it on the iPad, they will come to us.
But all those apps are still browser apps.
It's actually an icon on your device, so
Yeah,
it's an application.
But it runs as in a browser environment. So.
Yeah, many mobile applications are simply browser windows. Yeah.
But you're not planning any alternative user interfaces, GUI toolkits?
Yes, but they will. Yes, of course you can add that. If you want to use native buttons to go to the next slide, for example, feel free. But
but you have to do that for Android, for example, and it won't be cross-platform.
Yes, but you can make it cross-platform by using an HTML-based toolkit. That's what we're doing actually, because we don't want to use. We don't want to spend time too much on UIs. We want to write one UI which runs everywhere. And with this phone gap and Sensor Touch, which is a HTML framework for mobile devices, it actually looks quite native on different devices, but it's cross-browser, so to speak, or cross-phone. Viewer plugins integrated into more CMSs. Also have a nice standalone application. We have one, but we want to make it a bit more user-friendly. Collaborative editing, that's a very tough one. Yeah, so I'm not going to touch that for a while. if somebody says, yeah, this is really, I love Google Wave and I'm going to build it into WebODF, well, you're welcome. That would be really awesome, but it's pretty tough. As spreadsheets, currently when we load a spreadsheet, we don't actually recalculate all the values, because normally when you save a spreadsheet, actually the values are saved as well. We haven't implemented all the formulas yet. However, the people from TikiWiki, they also have a spreadsheet written in JavaScript, and we're going to look at, but they use a different formula specification. So the ODF has well, they actually have a big specification document saying what the formula should look like. So we would like to actually also implement all of those. And yeah, the TikiWiki guys are interested in that too, so we're probably going to be doing something like that. But in the end, we're a company, so this is the customer decides. If somebody says we want to use it in our website, but this is still not very much working, you can just fix it and send a patch, or I don't know, hire us to fix it. You can decide. Then this is the small. Yes.
Has it become officially supported? Because
What do you mean supported?
didn't it start as your personal project?
Yes. Everything starts as somebody's personal project. Yeah.
But is it now adopted by the company?
Yeah. This is the company I work for has adopted this.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's a good shift in the past year or so.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Most of the work on it actually. Well, let's say I put a month of personal time in it, and after that, the company said, yeah, we're going to invest in that. And we found also NLNet, which was on the first slide, which is a very cool. NLNet is great. They funded part of it.
Okay.
Actually, a large part of this. So, yeah. NLNet is awesome.
Also from this location, they're on the other side of this street.
Oh.
Yeah. There is,
That way.
if you look out the window in the right direction, in that direction,
That
you see
direction.
there- oh, sorry, that direction,
Yeah.
and you see their building.
Okay.
Close at home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, this is small advertisement. So our company actually, our job is to make free software, right? Nearly everything we do actually results in some repository somewhere on the internet, and we specialize in open document format. So this is, yeah. And we also help write Calligra, which is Office Suite, and we have been using that on the Nokia telephones. So we did a lot of optimization of the C++ code, and yeah. So we're porting it to a tablet now, and we also have it on the phone. We have added RDF support, so, and all of this knowledge we also intend to use much in WebODF.
You're almost down to 5 minutes.
That's good, because this is like the last slide.
Okay.
So, closing. WebODF adoption is growing, but of open document format is growing, but with WebODF we really want to accelerate it, because it just makes it very easy to just use it everywhere. And the community is very active. You saw all the different implementations. Even the big projects, they're so busy they fork to spread the load. Yeah, so WebODF can bring ODF support to your websites. It keeps it tapped and it makes it easy and fun. And I'd like to thank you. And before you start clapping, which, well, I mean, you might, I'd like to show you something interesting. This is a web page, right? So actually you've been watching WebODF all the time. This presentation runs in WebODF. And here this is the document. So here you can see all the XML of this presentation. Yeah. It's here, office document, blah blah blah. Okay, let's close that.
So we are not dependent anymore on OpenOffice or LibreOffice. We just need a browser for presentations.
Assuming that WebODF supports all the features you put in your presentation, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. One interesting thing I usually don't admit at talks, but you see it's a nice white sheet. Yeah, it's because I haven't implemented support for master styles yet. So it's Usually when presentations have a white background, this it's not because I'm a stylish guy, it's implementation thingy.
Okay.
But that's okay. I shouldn't have said that actually. But it's true. I would like to. Oh wait a minute. Let's see what other features. Oh yeah, this is our web page. Yeah. So here you can find out our features, our roadmap, license, API documentation, community. Here's a list of applications who are using it. Upcoming and past events, our mailing list, blog, blah blah blah.
By the way, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I was seeing this. I was wondering if people run Dillo and they don't have JavaScript support. Is there a way to view the document?
No, that's really stretching it. Yeah.
Okay.
We're still working on links. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it is also not the goal of you.
No.
Okay.
No, that would be stretching it really. Yeah, that would be.
E-links too should be supportable. It has JavaScript in the BOM implementation.
It does?
Yeah.
Oh. That's bad ideas to put into my head. I might test it. Yeah. Oh yeah, this I suggest we give this sticker out to
I
all
find it
our-
unlikely that Links supports Canvas though.
I'm not using Canvas.
You don't use it?
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask to Gabriel, is it possible to write something in Topaz that can be used as for WebODF?
Sorry, this is-
I can compile it to JavaScript, so as long as this is JavaScript, so I can,
But is it possible to write something in Topaz which not only outputs JavaScript, but also a whole document or?
yes, of course. Yeah, my goal is to, be able to write something like this in Topaz completely in the future.
Okay. But then you still need JavaScript.
It's, well, in the future, Topaz will be able to compile to different environments.
Okay.
So in principle, if you write it in Topaz,
Yeah.
you can compile it to JavaScript and HTML and run it in the browser, but also compile it in Flash or in C or whatever. But that's not, next month. It's more likely next decade.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you the. This is a sort of demo UI you can find via our website, and it just shows you a couple of test documents you can just browse. This was my. Yes,
I have two questions. Will there ever be WebDocX? And what is your stance in how will the world step over from a proprietary document format to an open document format? In general sense open. I mean, do you believe that LibreOffice and all the other Office suites should better implement the secret proprietary OOXML, etc. standard, or do you think that we should focus on politics and on telling people simply not to use proprietary document standards? If you understand
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah, I do. So WebOXML, it's certainly possible. Although what I hear, but I'm not an expert on OXML, is that the structure of their XML is less amenable to this type of usage. But I think it's probably possible. The second question is, what do I think about using different formats? I think we should make ODF use as attractive as possible.
Yeah. So.
And then just instead of saying you can't do this, you can't do that, make sure that you have a good
Yeah.
alternative.
Yeah, so start focusing on stimulating people to produce ODF files
Yeah,
instead of reading docx files.
Yes, I've been bad-mouthing the Dutch government because they're using iPad, but I would like to say that one thing they're very nice about is that they publish many documents as ODF. So
Okay.
that's, if you go to some central government sites and you look for documents, they will usually have HTML, PDF and ODT versions.
But will you also support ebook format, EPUB?
The browser will, but it's beyond this, it's
Okay.
a different thing. Yeah.
Because as far as I understood, EPUB is very familiar, it has many familiarities.
EPUB is basically simplified zipped HTML.
Yeah, okay.
So it should be adaptable to the same method of unzip
Yeah,
and
Yes.
render using some special CSS rules.
Okay.
Mhm.
There's a plugin for that for Style of OpenOffice and LibreOffice for EPUB.
Yeah,
Okay.
So it's actually it's to write an EPUB viewer
Mhm.
in the same way it would be simpler than this.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be a strict version to say that.
Yeah, because you don't need to. You can use a static CSS because you just know what type of EPUB you have, and then the people can choose what they want their reader to look like. Because EPUB doesn't say. ODF says this is what your stuff should look like. This is font size and everything. And EPUB is freer. It's just a text, and the formatting depends on the preferences of the reader.
And have you got ideas about WebPDF?
I don't have to do that. That's Mozilla doing it. PDF.js.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I hear there are some other people
yeah,
working
I'm
on that.
tinkering with it as well.
Okay. You mean in cooperation with WebODF or for yourself?
No, on its own. I actually hadn't heard of WebODF before.
Okay.
And I hadn't heard of his project, so this was a good day. Yeah.
May I know how it is called, the project?
It currently doesn't have a name. I haven't
Okay.
released anything so far.
But-
It's based on the WebPDF concept, but
Okay.
I'm using a different rendering method.
But you are specialized in PDF.
Not really, but the idea was there with WebPDF, and I found it lacking. So
Okay. Interesting.
That's what free software is all about. See, take the code and improve it. Yeah, I saw some questions there.
Okay. The browser.
How good is the rendering?
Some of them.
For the things you have implemented. I mean, one of the problems with conversions from Word always where here something is moving around and so on. So how good is it?
So the ODF says that if I send you a file and I use awesome crazy font, then and you don't have that awesome crazy font, then the layout will be different. And that's what the spec says. So it's not fixed.
No, I mean,
This is allowed to vary.
let's assume I have all the fonts needed for the document and so on. Do I actually get the same results as, for example, in OpenOffice or LibreOffice or KOffice?
Well, there's some features which we haven't implemented yet, and there's some features which are hard to do in a web browser. One thing is, for example, if I have a object embedded and it looks like this, and I want to have the text go like this,
Right.
that's not supported in HTML. That means that if we want to do something like that in WebODF, we have to have some very clever JavaScript to actually set the borders of every paragraph.
Right.
So that will be tough. Another funny thing is when you think about it, your head starts hurting, is tabs, right? If you have a text document, you can say, oh, I want a tab here, and the next line I want it here and here. HTML doesn't have tabs, they're not existent. So that's something we haven't solved yet. But the funny thing is that people are actually not missing tabs on web pages for some reason. I mean, they have tables, but tabs, I don't know, they're less interesting. People are not really seem to use them anymore. Apparently, the tab is a bit of a leftover from the typewriter.
Yeah, from the paper document publishing period.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They were
They
not,
type it yourself.
they were not supposed to be there in electronic documents. So.
Well, they are used, or if they are not used, it's often a lot more horrible because people are using long lines of spaces to do the indentation, which is not really better. The second question, of course, is how much work is already done on the editing functionality?
So the editing, if you know a bit about browsers, you know that this type of thing is not so hard to implement, right? Because the browsers themselves do this. However, when I start typing here, the browser will start adding HTML in there. So what we have here is when I leave this editing field, I trigger a send, and I can attach a function to sort of clean it up, or maybe remove stuff which I didn't want to use to type. But at the moment, editing is supported by allowing people to type within an existing paragraph. If you want to have, for example, if I press enter to get a new paragraph, you have to implement a handler for that. So right now, we think that the main use case for WebODF for editing is where you have templates. So you have a document, most of the stuff is already there, I need to fill in a few fields, and then it's like a form, but it looks like a piece of printed paper. So that's something which people will probably like. But if you want to write a new novel, it's probably not the right method.
Okay.
More questions? Can we wrap it up?
Ja,
I don't mind answering.
Geen sluitingswoord.
You're ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, and then I would like to ask everyone to give you a big applause. I will give you the bottle of wine.
Thank you very much.
So don't drink and drive at home.